So it looks like Diddy is finally starting to fight back at all the accusations and rumors surrounding him, and it's not surprising that Cassie is the first person that he is going after. I mean, this shouldn't be so surprising because Cassie's lawsuit was what started this off in the first place. With his trial starting very soon, we're starting to see people close to him starting to speak up, and one of his former employees just came out to speak on Cassie, exposing Cassie for allegedly being addicted to Coca-Cola, if you know what I mean. She also claimed that Cassie allegedly loved Diddy's freak-offs and allegedly attended out of her own free will. So did Cassie really lie to us, or is Diddy trying to set her up? Let's break this down. It goes without saying that Cassie's lawsuit left us traumatized, and I can't even imagine how traumatic it must have been for her to not only experience that in real time, but also relive it in her quest to find justice. The court documents came with a trigger warning on the front page, and that was the first sign that it was going to be a hot mess. In Cassie's lawsuit, she claimed that Diddy had allegedly put paws on her, SA'd her, forced her to use, pimped her out to male escorts for his own enjoyment, and a whole other list of things that he did to her. The lawsuit started off by revealing that he SA'd Miss Ventura in her own home after she tried to leave him, often kicked and stomped on Miss Ventura, resulting in bruises, burst lips, black eyes, and bleeding, forced Miss Ventura to engage in intimate acts with male SWs while getting off on it and filming the encounters, demanded that Miss Ventura to carry his firearm in her purse just to make her uncomfortable and demonstrate how dangerous he is, and introduced Miss Ventura to a lifestyle of excessive alcohol and substance and required her to procure illicit prescriptions to satisfy his own addiction. She also provided specific examples of times he allegedly put his hands on her. One instance was when she and Diddy went to a club and Cassie struck up a conversation with a music manager there. It wasn't as if she was trying to sign with the guy or anything, but Diddy got so furious that once they left the club, Mr. Combs Miss Ventura, pushing her into a corner of the vehicle and stomping on her face. When the car arrived at Mr. Combs' residence, Miss Ventura attempted to run away, but Mr. Combs followed her and proceeded to again kick her in the face. Miss Ventura was bleeding profusely and was ushered into Mr. Combs' home, where she began to throw up from the violent incident. His beatings often left her with bruises, and he was so desperate to hide this that he did all he could to hide it. The court documents said, over the next decade, multiple times each year, Mr. Combs would Miss Ventura, leaving on her body. After every instance in which he Miss Ventura, Mr. Combs used his money and power to orchestrate extensive efforts to hide the evidence of his, including by hiding Miss Ventura in hotels for days at a time to let her heal. Oh, and let's not even get into the reports on how he allegedly used to SA and pimp her out. In the lawsuit, Cassie wrote, the first time, Mr. Combs hired a man and brought the man to his home in Los Angeles. The man, Mr. Combs, and Miss Ventura wore masquerade masks and ingested. Mr. Combs directed Miss Ventura to perform intimate acts with this man while Mr. Combs watched them. The entire encounter lasted multiple days. Mr. Combs began to call this arrangement a freak-off, or FO. At first, Diddy denied the allegations, telling the usual story of how Cassie was after money, blah blah blah. His lawyer released a statement saying he vehemently denies these offensive and outrageous allegations. Miss Ventura's demand of $30 million, under the threat of writing a damaging book about their relationship, was unequivocally rejected as blatant blackmail. Despite withdrawing her initial threat, Miss Ventura has now resorted to filing a lawsuit riddled with baseless and outrageous lies, aiming to tarnish Mr. Combs' reputation and seeking a payday. He ended up settling the lawsuit with Cassie in under a day, probably thinking it would silence the case and that everyone would just move on after a few days. But the universe had other plans and hit him with a big sight. In fact, he totally played himself because even more people started coming forward to reveal how Diddy had allegedly SA'd them. Now, those lawsuits were all civil lawsuits, so Diddy could have easily made them go away by settling out of court, but the feds decided to get a piece of the pie and they made moves to indict Diddy. CNN was the first to report that the feds were going after Diddy. They wrote, federal investigators are preparing to bring accusers of music mogul Sean Diddy Combs before a federal grand jury, two sources familiar with the probe tell CNN, signaling the U.S. Justice Department is moving toward potentially seeking an indictment of Combs. They went on to say that possible witnesses have been notified by investigators that they could be brought in to testify in front of a federal grand jury in New York City, according to one source. Bringing individuals who have filed civil lawsuits against Combs before a grand jury would mark a significant escalation in the government's ongoing investigation involving the producer and Bad Boy Records founder. If we're being honest, there was a lot of doubt about whether or not Diddy would get indicted because the lawsuits against him were civil, and most had passed the statute of limitations anyway. But the feds did their thing and they got an indictment against him. They also released an indictment document revealing some seriously shady things about Diddy. The feds made similar allegations accusations as Cassie in their indictment against him in front of a grand jury, and according to the legal documents, Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. It continued. Freak-offs occur regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion. Not long after this, a video leaked of Diddy putting paws on Cassie in a hotel lobby, and it was worse than we could have imagined. But even with this, Diddy's lawyers were extremely confident that he was going to beat the charges until he got denied for bail twice. He even offered up $50 million, his and his mom's houses, his passport, and those of his kids, but the courts still denied him, and that was when they knew that the feds meant business. Well, it looks like they're finally starting to do some damage control, because we're now seeing people come out and try to whitewash his image, like this person who had the audacity to claim that Cassie loved the freak-offs and everything else that Diddy did to her.
Sean has always been somebody that I wanted to be like.
Cassie.
Love her to death, naive, like getting high. She likes partying. She liked that. Was the thing.
Speaking of the after party.
I don't know. Don't talk about no baby oil, man. Like, I still use baby oil. Y'all need to get into it. I saw Cassie grow up from a little girl that was willing to, like, give everybody, you know, lap dances, basically. You know, and get drunk and just have a good, like, model time.
What's your relationship like with Dawn?
I don't fuck with Dawn like that. And I'm gonna handle business. I didn't see that. What I saw was what the going on with you, because you acting weird. You're weird, is what I see. And it's a list of niggas. Where y'all at? Talk about it. Dawn's a weird man, but y'all call me to tell the truth. I'm finna tell the truth. Just go with it. Just go with it. We don't have to think about nothing. Just go with it. Oh, just go with it. Just go with it.
Child, the BS is strong with this one, so this woman really expects us to believe that Cassie really loved being forced to use substances, treated like she wasn't a human being, pimped out to male S-workers, recorded without her consent, and all of that. Yeah, it doesn't exactly seem like a consensual situation to me, but then we already know that Diddy was surrounded by a bunch of yes men who protect him, so I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Well, this is what fans had to say. Pick me a lady. Cassie being young and having a fun time doesn't equate to Diddy her in that hallway or the other things he's been accused of doing. And now Kalina, I liked you, but them checks ain't that cute to jeopardize your integrity, girl. But y'all drop your thoughts in the comments, then check out this next video.